Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our Aging and Spirituality podcast, where we focus every time on helping each other to unlock our unrealized potential, live our best life, no matter what age. And today we've got a special treat. We'll be interviewing a very special guest, Sheree Clark. Sheree is a midlife courage coach, and she's going to talk about what that means, who calls her practice Fork in the Road. Sheree says that she became a courage coach because she believes it takes guts to live the second half of her life for you, especially when you've lived the first half for everybody else. She's written and presented on topics ranging from managing regrets and finding your passion to overcoming career burnout. And she's an entrepreneur, and she owned a successful advertising agency for over 25 years before pivoting to what she is now is a life coach. And this was in her 50s. But she didn't abandon the creativity of her advertising world when she started the coaching practice. She has unique exercises and she's developed to help people in achieving their goals. So I thought we would start off by just saying our listeners are over 50, and I really think that they'll be very interested in why you shifted careers in your 50s and the things that you had to overcome.
Oh, what a great question. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Chris and Kathy, for having me today. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to be very honest with every question that you ask me. You're going to get the unvarnished truth.
That's what we want.
So I left the advertising world at the age of 53, as you indicated. I owned an advertising firm for 25 years. And it was great for about 14. The first 14 years was awesome. And I say that it was great. And I know specifically how long, because I had started the business with a partner, and the partner was also my love interest. And so it was a man, and he and I lived together, ran the business together. We never married, but we had a very close relationship. Well, the relationship itself imploded at the 14-year mark. He moved out, but we stayed in business together, which, depending on what you're doing when you're listening, listeners, you're probably either your mouth dropped to the floor and you thought, oh, holy shit, there's no way I could do that. Or you were like, wow, that's really cool. I admire you for your tenacity. And so the real answer is somewhere in between. There was a part of me, I'm glad I stayed from the standpoint of I loved the business and I loved what I was doing. But there was another part of me that got stifled, because changing a primary relationship that dramatically is a very big deal. Imagine seeing your ex, whether it's ex-husband, ex-lover, ex whatever, every day for a minimum of 8 hours. And having to agree for the sake of business and for employees. That's a difficult thing. So anyway, I give you that as background because the second part of if you're doing the math, if it was great for the first 14 and the last 10, it wasn't as great. It wasn't as great partly because of that transition. The other thing was, it was time for me to go. And I had already felt like with that relationship blowing up, that so much of my life had blown up. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to just keep something status quo. And so I stayed, and I stayed longer than I should have, just in full transparency. So it took a long time to find the courage. And that's how I ended up here, because I realized there was a better way. And once I did it and made my exit, I wanted to help others.
Wow. I'm laughing because before we got online, we were talking about some of the similarities between us, and there's another one. I did exactly that myself. I went into business in the early years with my ex, and when we divorced, of course, we split up those businesses. But to this day, I still have a business running with him 40 something years later. So it's crazy, right?
It's crazy.
And our evolutionary path is kind of the similar too. It was like we've done business, we got to a certain point, and then we went, yeah, I know why I've done this. There was a specific reason for me. I had to overcome the idea of being poor and being able to build my own business, and he very much helped me become a very strong entrepreneur. So I'm really grateful to him for that. But then there came that point when my inside was saying, no, you're called to do new things. You're called to do, and that's, our paths separated, and I came into this whole new life very similar actually to what you're talking about. What I really got excited about when I was looking at your website is the part where you're talking about courage, and you talk about it a lot. And so I want to have you just tell people your story about why you think this is very important for midlife or older people to focus on, the aspect of courage, and how do they go about doing that?
I often talk about courage and define it. Obviously, it's defined in my tagline. It takes guts to live the second half of your life for you. But the other thing about courage that I want to say, so that we've got it as a sense of kind of a background, is that I think there's two kinds of courage. And I think one kind is reactive, and that means we don't think much about it. So if your child runs into the street and there's a car coming, you don't think, you run after them, you do it, you do what you got to do. You're risking your life, and it doesn't matter. You got to do what you got to do. Same thing as if you are diagnosed with something horrible, and people say, wow, you're fighting a courageous battle. What choice do you have? Let's face it, so
Right.
so yes, you might call it courageous, but it's reactive. It's like you're playing the hand you're dealt. The kind of courage that I like to deal in is the kind that I would call more, you get more judiciousness about whether or not you exercise it. That's the proactive courage that it takes to get out of a bad relationship, to quit a job, to move to another place, to take a risk and downsize, to do whatever it is that we would call a, quote, big move in our lives. And as we get older, littler things become bigger moves in some ways. You're like, well, I really want to do something else with my career, but I've been an accountant for 46 years. So I guess I'm going to have to finish in that regard. So that's what I want to talk about, is the proactive kind of courage. And I think it's important because nothing happens unless somebody does something. In the business world, we say nothing happens until somebody sells something. Well, it's the same thing in life. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you got. So if you want something different, you got to do something different. And that takes guts. And I want to acknowledge that and say that, because somebody listening, probably a lot of somebody's listening, are thinking, yeah, there is a change that I have been wanting to make. And I just keep tamping it down, putting it to the side, stuffing it because it's too much work. I don't know how. What if I fail? What if? So does that help?
That does help, yeah.
And so as you talk to people, what are the obstacles, and, how do you help them overcome obstacles? Like if they're saying, what if, I don't know, it's basically a fear mode, but.
Yep. So the fear is the biggest obstacle. It's really at the root of almost everything. And it comes disguised sometimes as lack of confidence or whatever, feeling you're not supported, all of those kinds of things. Typically, that feeling has its roots in some past experience. So oftentimes it's in our upbringing. If you were raised in a family where money was scarce, let's say it's a blue collar, middle class, lower middle class, whatever, and everybody has to play it safe, we watch our pennies, we never buy the brand products, all of those things, it's going to be hard to break the tendency to take risks, to go out and be an entrepreneur, to say, hey, hell or high water, damn the torpedoes, bring it on. And so it's a matter of rewinding the tape and finding where did that belief system get instilled? And is it so lodged in so heavily that it's not, you can't undo it and can't uncouple from it? And P.S., spoiler alert, the answer is no, it's not going to be. You can dislodge yourself from it. It's not for a forever thing. For some, it takes more effort and energy. For some, it takes therapy in addition to coaching, whatever. But it's a matter of being able to take off the glasses you're wearing and put on different glasses and say, this tape I'm playing, I didn't record in the first place. This is a tape that came from my parents, and their tape came from their parents, and their parents were raised during the Depression, or their parents were fill in the blanks, immigrants or discriminated against, or whatever it is. And all that stuff gets passed down.
Wow.
So that's why it takes courage to get away from that.
Yes, and to face your fears, first of all, right? So that's the first step. Like when you get somebody in your phone or office for the first time, and you know that, this is a situation where I have to figure out, they have to figure out what their fears are and then create a plan to get over it. How do you do that? What's your starting point?
Well, the first thing, as I said, is to identify where did this come from? And then the second is to disassemble it and say, okay, which parts of these are the strongest and have the biggest grasp around my neck? What is it that we really need to work on first? Because some fears you can damn the fear and move ahead anyway. There are certain things that you don't necessarily need to really disassemble. And it's a matter of picking out which of those things are the biggest logs and the biggest things. And depending on what it is, either craft a workaround or a strategy for getting through it. Many times, I know that this is a yoga audience, many times it's not about unlearning something. It sometimes is finding that inner peace within, and a yoga practice can help with that. Find that place where you can connect with your true self, not the self that you were told you are, or that the teacher said, or that society said, or that you fell into as a role because you're female, born during this decade and living in this part of the country. It's finding that inner peace place and being able to tap into that really underutilized resource that we have in ourselves, which is our own strength.
No doubt.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, I went through a divorce, like it's over 30 years ago now. It's maybe 35 years ago. I'm not sure how long, but it was interesting what you said about finding the inner peace, because when I knew I needed to make the move, it was because I had been practicing yoga for about 10 years at that time, and I had established an inner courage and a peace to make that move, because my daughter was just becoming a teenager. I had been working as a marketing consultant, so I needed to get full-time work. I mean, everything was changing. I bought a new car. Someone ran into me. So it was like every one of life's major issues was happening at once. But it did take, that's what I think powered me through.
Yes. And what we're talking about is the whole principle of grounding. And as you were talking, Chris, I had this vision of you in Warrior. It's like, because those grounding practices that we have, and yoga is one, there are others, and they work oftentimes in tandem. And so journaling, for some, it's a faith-based practice. It might be prayer, or it might be attendance at a church or synagogue, whatever that is.
Yeah, that gives you that sense of your true self. Yeah.
Yes, and connection with spirit, whatever you call spirit in your world, and finding that place of strength, that the strength of the unseen. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. And to me, what all of this does, the things that we're talking about, is open the door. We're talking about courage, but it also opens the door to be courageous enough to see opportunity and to sense synchronicity, and to know that there are no accidents, that when something happens, it's often because there's something being told to you. A very quick story for you that's a good example of this. I've had a year from hell. 2003, that's I'm stuck in a time where 2023 cannot be over with soon enough for me. It's just been thing after thing after blow after crushing blow. And one of those crushing blows was, I saw, I have a tree in my yard. I have 5 big old oak trees. They're about 150 years old. And one of them I knew wasn't doing well. It didn't sprout leaves this spring. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to make a decision about this tree. But, a 150-year-old tree, you've got a few years, it's going to stand for a while and, all of those things. And so I mourned for this tree, and to the point where, and our listeners are going to be women of a certain age who probably are familiar with Elton John. And Elton John has a song called Funeral for a Friend. And I played the song at 11 o'clock on a Friday night at high volume in my bedroom with the French doors to the outside open for my tree, because I wanted it to know that I recognized that it was dying and that I saw it. The following morning, I got up early, cleaned my house like a maniac, like I do on Saturdays. And it was about 11 o'clock in the morning. This was May 4th. I went outside and stood on my deck, and I was at eye level with my tree. I'm up in the trees, and my tree picked that moment to fall. I couldn't make this up. Yeah. The tree was ill, but I had no idea it was that ill. Wow. It just completely fell over on its side. And I believe it waited for me to witness it.
Wow.
And that softened the blow of the loss. I had cried the night before over the tree and over the decision that I knew I was going to have to make in many years. I didn't know it was going to be in 12 hours. So I think when we have our eyes open to those kinds of things, seeing cardinals, seeing a double rainbow when you need the reassurance, when you've lost someone, whatever those things are, it's not in your head. You're not crazy. You're not imagining things. You're not woo-woo. You're not a nutcase. They're real.
You're connecting to nature at that point, right? Which is a great way to kind of segue into the question for some people who get to midlife, are used to operating in a certain way, and now all of a sudden there's a lot of opportunities that come up, and they have to make a decision and get clear about what it is that I really want in my life. And time is scrunching down on them, and it all feels a little more urgent, and that kind of makes them a little panicky. And so it's difficult to get to that clarity. And so, as you said, we're going to connect to the inner self, which is very helpful. And that's something Chris and I talk about all the time. Connect to nature. Another amazing thing to be able to do to help you, and nature, animals can be your guides. And so I want to just ask you to talk a little bit about, that woman that spent her whole life taking care of somebody else, and then wakes up and she's 50 and she's like, I don't have a clue what I want for my own life. I don't have a clue. Where do I start? I don't know what my potential is. What the hell does that mean? I've never even thought about that. Where does somebody at that place start to get clarity about what their next steps are?
I love that question. Thank you for asking it. For me, it starts with being quiet. And I have actually an exercise that I do with my clients. It doesn't take very long to do. And if you would like, I can do it with you here. It takes us about 2 minutes.
Sure.
And I say, let's
love that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing, and anybody listening, if you're driving, you're not going to want to do this. So the first thing that you will do is you will become conscious of your body and feel your sit bones if you're seated in your chair or wherever you're sitting on, and be conscious. I like to put my feet flat on the floor when I'm doing this and sit up straight, but not in an uncomfortable way, just comfortable. If you've got armrests, you can rest your elbows on there. And then take a couple of breaths at your own pace. I won't guide you in that, but as I'm speaking, if you would like to breathe, however it is that you breathe to center yourself. And then oftentimes I will invite people to close their eyes. If you don't want to do that, you can just simply lower your gaze. And then when you find that moment, that place of where you're ready to join me, you're going to take your right hand and you're going to place it over your heart center. And then you'll take your left hand and place it over the top of your right, so that you are caressing your heart chakra. And preferably with your eyes closed or your gaze lowered, you're going to ask yourself this question. Dear heart, what is it that you want for us? What is it that you truly want? And you sit in the stillness for a moment. And oftentimes the answer will come immediately. Sometimes as a visual or a word, or what sounds like a spoken something, a whisper. Sometimes all you'll have is a feeling. It might be that sensation that happens in your nose before you begin to cry. You might even have actual tears. Whatever it is, that's the beginning of your answer. And I say the beginning because it's infrequent that someone will have the entire answer flood on them at once. But if you get used to this practice over time, and it doesn't take a lot of time, I'm thinking it could be days, you will begin to sense what it is that your heart wants for you. And it's important to listen. So that would be a beginning place for me also, again, because we're speaking to yogis. My cat, who's laying in a basket on my desk, his name is Lotus. And because my favorite pose is bound lotus. And I like to ask myself that question when I'm sitting in lotus. Sometimes I'll sit with my forehead on the floor and connect with my heart that way. Other times I will sit upright in lotus with my hands on my heart. And that's how I connect.
That's a beautiful practice. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, that was very sweet. My heart expanded. I just wanted to be connected to the divine flow that we live in if we pay attention to it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, we know what to do if we pay attention.
Exactly. Because, and here's the thing, the reason that it works, Chris and Kathy, is that we don't ask. We don't ask ourselves that question. Other people don't ask us that question. If they do, it's in therapy, or it's a friend that's asking, but the friend doesn't want, in some cases, the actual answer. If you say to your friend, well, I want to move to Nairobi, your friend's going to say, well, why the hell would you do that? How are we going to have wine on Friday nights? So when other people have skin in your game, it's harder to connect with yourself and to connect with them and to be authentic with them and what you want, because they got a horse in your race,
And then the courage comes in again. You have to be courageous enough to follow your own path, no matter where it takes you.
That's exactly right.
Sometimes that costs you change. Change is hard to do for that very reason. That's why people avoid it,
Yep.
It makes them have to be courageous and do things that scare the crap out of them.
Exactly.
It's about others having skin in your game. They're trying to keep you where you were.
Yeah.
That's hard too.
It's extremely hard. And the thing about it is that once when you're in this fragile place of trying to figure out what it is that you want, and you're not even to that place where and you're working on that. Fragile is a word I used deliberately, because when you float a fledgling idea by someone, a trusted other, and it gets shot down or poo-pooed or not even nurtured or whatever, it's like killing a baby plant. It's like that's why we don't walk on a new grass seed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we say that in our yoga class. When you plant a new tree, what it is that you're growing into, make sure you guard it. You don't want
get trampled.
So true.
I wanted to ask you about limiting stereotypes, because that's another thing in yoga. We say whatever you habitually think and feel, you bring into your existence. And so you want to change that if you need to make a change. But there are so many stereotypes about getting older and thinking things that you can't do. And how do you deal with that? Because clearly you have transgressed all of that.
Well, thank you. I wish that were 100% true. We teach the things that we need to learn, I think, sometimes. And so I'm not certainly, I've gotten better over time. I've done it with practice, but I'm not perfect. So remind me the question again. I'm sorry. I wanted to share that with you. And also, while you're repeating it, I'm going to adjust my blind because I'm being blinded by this light.
We can see it on your face too. It looks uncomfortable. Okay, good. There you go.
So I was talking about overcoming limiting stereotypes of aging.
Yes. Yes. And so the limiting stereotypes of aging obviously come from society, and they're real. I'm not going to poo-poo them and say, well, it's in your head that people think that women after age whatever are invisible. Hell, it happened to me this morning in the coffee shop. If I were 22 and a little hottie in a short skirt, I would have gotten better service. I know that. And yet sometimes being invisible has its value as well. We all know that. But the stereotypes, I think acknowledging them is a beginning, and being mindful of how you acknowledge, not acknowledge like, nah, I'm not a little 20-year-old hottie, so therefore I got this and I got that. That's not a growth phase. That's not a growth stage or attitude. I think it makes more sense to say, there was a time in my life that I would have been waited on more quickly, and that time has clearly passed. So being mindful from day to day. The other part is to be conscious of the conversations you have in your own head, which we've touched on a little bit, but I think we get stuck in a rut and in our ways. I mentioned going to the coffee shop this morning. I typically make my coffee or tea or whatever it is I'm going to be drinking in the morning at home. Well, I'm trying not to drink a lot of coffee, so I don't have any in the house, but I woke up this morning wanting an Americano. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. I didn't have any coffee, any espresso in my house. I drove myself to the coffee shop. It felt really good to do something different. That's out of my routine. That's not what I typically do. And when I came back, I felt like, you know what? I'm going to journal sitting in a different place than I normally sit to journal. And I did that. So part of it is getting out of our own way and stopping with the stereotypes that we do with ourselves. When you hear yourself saying, I'm not very good with technology, or I don't do well in crowds, or I'm an introvert, or fill in the blank, I don't look good in fill in the blank, whatever it is. Some of those things might be accurate. Maybe yellow isn't your color. But when was the last time you did something different or unusual or out of your normal realm? When was the last time you took a different route? One of the things that an assignment that I gave to a group that I taught in the summer was to drive a different way to wherever it is that you're going, whether it's work, yoga class, whatever it is, drive a different way every morning. And I did that myself. And I drove, and I live in Des Moines, Iowa. So trying to find for 30 days, 30 different ways to get to a yoga studio is a challenge. But all you had to do was change one street or one whatever. So instead of taking the most direct route, take a little jag or a jig, or next time when you leave, if you live west of the studio, drive east and then circle back, something different. And what it does is it makes you conscious and aware. You start seeing things that you didn't notice because that's not the street that you're used to driving on. You realize, holy cow, there's a restaurant there. Oh my gosh, when did they build that? When did they tear down the radio tower? Right. And all of a sudden, your life has a different perspective, but it takes diligence and it takes consciousness.
Yeah, and presence, putting your awareness on it. It makes me think of, the theme that we like to focus on here is not being complacent, not giving up on your dreams, finding out what it is that I use the term purpose lightly because it can go in so many directions, but really that thing that lights you up, like I mean, it's so important to have a life coach, I think, during this time of life, just because there are so many roads that you could go down that would be empty. And having somebody that's a guide can be really, really useful. Just like, I had a yoga teacher so many years ago, and who knows where my life would be if I hadn't started out on that path. But I'm thinking for the people that are at home and they're not at a place where they think, oh, I'm going to pick up the phone and call a life coach. What kind of exercise yeah, I guess the exercise is the right word, would you give them to take that first step out and start thinking about what is it about me that's unique? What is it about me what are my skills and my talents, and what is it that I could do in the world that would be of service to people? How would you handle that?
I love that. So, one of the things that I like to do, and they do it, it was a trend, it was a kind of a trendy thing in the business world about 10, 15 years ago. And and maybe they still do it, 360 interviews, which is or 360 evaluations, which is where typically in the corporate setting, if you work for somebody, your boss evaluates you, and then it's usually performance review, and then that's based on your salary and whatever, blah, blah, blah. A 360 review is when you invite others to reflect back to you what your strengths and not strengths are. And so it could be a person you report to directly, a colleague, somebody on your team, somebody that reports up to you, somebody that you don't work with. So it's asking people around you, what do you see that I might not see? Typically 360s are done anonymously. I think it's possible to do a 360 by inviting people strategically to have a conversation with you about those things. I have done it. I call it informational interviewing. It's an assignment I have given to my clients before, and it's identifying someone who you trust. Often, again, for the same reason, not to ask your best friend because your best friend is going to be jaded. You're wonderful. You're perfect. I love you. What are you even talking about? You don't have any flaws. And plus it's hard, you don't want to jeopardize your relationship, but to go to someone and to say, when you think of me, what do you think of in terms of my skill sets?
Yeah.
What are my strengths?
Right.
If you were meeting me for the first time, and however you want to couch your questions, and there's some beautiful questions that you can ask, and that's a good place to start.
That's a great idea. I mean, we could do that like if you can get even just 3 girlfriends together and say, if I was not in the room, what would be missing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love answering that question.
Yeah,
What would you miss if I wasn't here?
Yeah.
That's really specific and unique to who you are.
Exactly. And it's a lot more savvy than saying, what would you write in my eulogy? Because nobody
at our age wants to hear about eulogies.
We don't want to think about that.
No, words that start with E, like eulogy, elderly, those are kinds of, we don't want to hear those words.
That's funny.
Yeah. So that would be a starting place, Kathy. And then the other thing I would say is, before somebody decided that life coaching wasn't something they wanted to do, I'd invite you to stalk a life coach or two, and you can stalk me. It's pretty easy to do. You go on the internet and you visit the website, you listen to interviews like this. You say, all right, there's that one interview that she did. Let me hear some of the other things that she's talked about. Let me see what other pearls of wisdom I can pick up, and let me see if I feel any kind of a synchronicity with this person or with the concept of coaching in general. There are some people, I'm not their cup of tea. I have been known to swear, damn it. So if you don't like my direct approach, if the woo side of me, I think my tree waited for me to fall, if that's like not in your wheelhouse, that's fine. Then find a different coach. You're looking for a match, and it's a two-way street. It's not just who can help me. It's who do I respect? Who do I like? Who do I trust?
Yeah.
And do they have something that I think I could benefit from?
Well, that's a great description. I makes me want to ask you the question of, you've been doing this for a while now, and what is the most rewarding part about being a coach and about running your fork in the road business? What is it that keeps you excited about it and coming back to it?
Perhaps not surprising is to see the aha moment in a client's eyes,
Okay.
to see that moment. And I see you guys nodding, and it's like the moment when maybe somebody in your class manages to get into a pose that they hadn't been able to maneuver prior to that, or when they find the place in their hearts where they can let go of the questing for it and allow it to just happen. It's that.
Yeah.
So I would say that, and it happens in different ways. For some people, I see it in their eyes if we're meeting in person or meeting by Zoom, because so many of my clients are not local. Other times, if I'm having a phone conversation with somebody and we'll be talking, and then there's this dead silence. And I know they're having a mic drop moment, that they just, yep, they've connected some dots in their own head, and they just had a holy cow moment.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Silence.
Yes, exactly. There's nothing to say.
That's when you feel like you're really being of service. And that it makes me want to wonder about fork in the road. Is there something new that's coming up in your world that you're creating? What are your current plans, or your just in the future things that you're looking to do?
Well, I walk my talk, Kathy. So for 8 years, I offered a year-long group coaching program called Road to a New You. The last cohort of that group is meeting now. We started in September. I will take that group through till August. And then in August, I'm going to reinvent how I coach and how I offer it. And I don't know, because that's 8 months from now, what that looks like exactly. I'm trusting the universe, trusting my own ingenuity, smarts, zone of genius.
Right.
I just knew that what I was doing, I had done for 8 years successfully, and I was becoming less innovative.
Yeah.
And I needed to shake it up.
Yeah.
And that's to me, that's walking your talk. I mean, I tell people, drive a different way to work and ask your heart how it's doing and all those things. Well, if I don't do that, why the hell would anybody listen to me?
Right. Yeah.
Well, and your
skills
have grown.
I've been teaching yoga for many years, probably, I don't know, close to 40
He
years.
doesn't want to say the number.
Right. Long time. But, and we share yoga, not just the poses, but we also share the higher yogas, meditation, and how to have a deep experience of your inner self. And I taught different classes, and it was always exciting for me, the same thing when the light goes on, when they would see it. But it was also important to change it up, not to change the information, but how it was delivered. And the very exciting thing was one of the great blessings of the pandemic. When that hit, we started teaching. We just immediately started teaching online, and it was so exciting because now we had people from all over. It wasn't just local people. And there's a girl from Texas who comes very regularly to some of the online classes that I teach, and she said, I've been looking for something like this for years, and I just couldn't find it in Texas. And it's very exciting, and it's to hear that, and but it is very important, I think, to not get into that. I know some people who teach, and they teach the same thing over and over in the same way over and over, and that people sense that and pick that up. They're not getting the depth that there's always something new.
Right. It's like we're women. We change our hair. We do think we gotta change it up sometimes, because if you don't, you're just gonna get stuck.
Right. Speaking of changing hair, I didn't remember what my natural color was until I had to renew my driver's license. And I said,
exactly. I know.
Don't color it. You'll find out your natural color. Real quick.
really fast, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing we were talking before we started about the changes that happen to us. It's a constant daily reminder of the time is going by.
Yes.
And things are changing, nothing's static. Everything in the world is changing. Just go for 2 days without listening to the news and then tune into it and go, holy cow, when did this happen?
Yeah.
And it's happening to us too. And the thing I think that's important, if I could instill something in anybody, it would be a little bit of urgency. It's a little bit of, what decade are you in? And how much time do you think you have left? And if there are things that you want to do or craving, that you're looking to find the depths of that courage so that you can do something, just try it. Nobody says you have to commit to a marathon when you haven't even run your first step yet.
Yeah.
All you got to do is maybe go online and pick out the right running shoes. Let's start there. And then tomorrow you put them on and you walk around the block. And then you walk around 2 blocks, and we do it gradually. And so the thing with change, and the thing that I sometimes get frustrated with women who I know are capable of doing great things, is that they will say, they'll jump ahead. Yeah, but what if this and what if that? And then what about that? And then how about when that happens? And I'm like, stay in the step that you're on. All we're doing is looking to see, do you want 0 gravity running shoes, or do you want shoes with a wide toe box? Let's start there. And
That's the biggest challenge of yoga, keeping him in the present moment.
Right. Right.
Stop trying to leapfrog into the future. We're not going to control this. Stay in the damn present moment.
That's right. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. If you leap ahead, you miss the lesson.
So
Yes.
Sheree, is there anything, we haven't covered that you would like to share, with folks?
I think if you're, again, obviously you're listening to this, if someone's tuned in and they've gotten this far, there's a reason that you're here. There's a reason that you're here in this place now, that you're hearing this message. Only you know what it is. I don't. And maybe you don't know 100%. Maybe you just are feeling like, you know what? I don't know why, but this is tugging at me for some reason. Be patient with that. Sit with it, explore it, don't run from it, and don't be afraid of it, because it's here for a reason. It's here to remind you. It's a mirror being held up in front of your face saying, sister, you ain't done yet.
Yeah. I love
So
that.
heed those words.
I love it. That's awesome. That's really awesome.
Listen to your inner voice. That's what it's all about.
Amen. And ask Lotus, he'll tell you.
Well, thank you so much, Sheree. I think this is really helpful for our
Very
viewers
helpful.
listening, and it's been helpful for us. I
Yep.
found the exercise awesome, and it just reminds me to be really open so folks, we'll put a link to your website in the show notes, and we'll be sharing this on YouTube, and so we'll get a chance to find out a little bit more about what a courage life coach is.
Yes, if you want to find Sheree, she's at fork-road.com. That's where her website is.
Right.
We'll put that in the notes, as Chris said, and we'll stay in touch and see what you're up to.
Yeah, we definitely want to stay in touch. We could do this again sometime.
Yeah.
I would love that. You cannot get rid of me. I'm not going anywhere. I've had too much fun.
You can join us online too, and come and do some pranayams and have fun with it. Meditate with.
Right. Yeah.
That would be fun.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys. And I'll bring Lotus. He hogs the mat though.
He's welcome. Lotus is welcome. All righty. Bye, listeners.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.